At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back on the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
Regrets are a completely normal thing whenever you make a huge decision, and sometimes even smaller decisions. You know, there's times when you order a meal at a restaurant and you get the plate and you're like, oh man, I should have got, and then fill in the blank. And I'm not trying to equate marriage to the exact same thing, because let's face it, it is not. It's very different, and it's a much more lifelong and drastic decision. And it's a much more important decision than what you're going to eat for dinner tonight or what you're going to have for lunch, because you have more opportunities to make choices like that down the line. And when it comes to marriage, you get one chance. At least that's what I believe. Today, we're going to be tackling the regret issue that I know so many men face whenever they get married. And in fact, it keeps a lot of men from crossing the threshold and making the commitment to get married because they don't want to get it wrong. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Husband Coach's Corner, the podcast designed to help husbands learn how to love their wives and become better men in the process. I'm your host, Chris Scott, and today we are talking about regrets, because this is one of the biggest things that I've heard so many men tell me, like, hey, Chris, I can't get married because if I marry the wrong woman, then there's going to be problems. And let me just be the first to tell you, when you get married, that is the beginning of a journey between the two of you. And yes, there are going to be problems. All right. There you go. Like, if that's the pressure, if that's the thing that is holding you back, if you're one of the people listening or thinking in that regard, yes, there are going to be problems. There's going to be challenges, and that's perfectly okay. In fact, I think that that's what strengthens the bond of marriage, and it gets you that much closer to loving your wife. All right. Now, this idea of regret, I don't want you to beat yourself up. I don't want you sitting there thinking like, oh man, and if I regret getting married, then I'm just like some terrible husband. No, don't do that. All right. Because that's not going to help you overcome the issue. Instead, I want you to identify it and say, yeah, you know what? I do have some ideas or doubts about getting married or being married. All right. Today, we're going to be talking to the newlyweds or the people in the first 5 years of marriage. Now, this episode is still applicable to anyone that's beyond 5 years of marriage, or maybe even people who aren't married yet. All right. If you haven't proposed to your wife and your fiance, your girlfriend, however you're looking at it, if you haven't proposed yet, then this episode is still for you, because maybe this is the thing that's keeping you from making that commitment. But really, I want to focus on the people who have made the commitment, who did say I do, and they're ready to tackle this issue of regret that kind of lingers in the first couple years of marriage. Like, did I make the right decision? Even though you know you did and you feel that you did, but there's some things that come up and you're like, oh man, why did I even get married in the first place? All right. I want to help you overcome buyer's remorse. Like, not saying that your wife is bought, but I think everyone gets the idea. And if you're not in the US, there's this idea of like, when you get something, you're like, oh, if I had just waited, then the next model would have come out. And, that's not what it's like in marriage. And I want to help overcome that mindset. So I rambled on enough at the beginning here. I got my notes over here. So if you're watching the video podcast and you see me looking off then that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the best content that I possibly can. So if you want to get a hold of me, check the description box on whatever platform you are listening to this on, or the show notes, whatever they call it. And there's some contact info in there. You can reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to help out wherever I can. All right. So I already told you, don't beat yourself up. All right. We're going to unpack the regret. That's the first step. We got to unpack this. Don't beat yourself up. Instead, if you are feeling regret, what I want you to do is ask yourself, what can I learn from this feeling? And what do I need to understand about why I'm feeling regret? All right. That's the very first thing. Why am I feeling this? And it could be tied to a few different things. It could be tied to unrealistic expectations, a specific unmet need, stress in other areas of your life that really don't have anything to do with marriage. Like work can really cause stress in marriage, especially if you feel like you're not performing or providing well enough, or something else that's just driving you into this idea that you're not good enough, or something else could be driving the issue that really isn't tied to the marriage, but you bring it back to the marriage because that is the reality, right? Is this a sign of depression or anxiety? Now, we're not going to go deep into that because I'm not a psychologist or a counselor, but if you're feeling regret with your marriage or being married, this could be an early onset to some anxiety that you're having. And let's face it, as husbands, I think many of us have some degree or level of anxiety. All right. And I feel like that's probably one of the culprits to feeling regret or doubt. You're anxious about something, right? Either you're not going to be able to provide, you're not going to be faithful, right? Let's just call it what it is. Maybe you just don't have the interest of developing a relationship. There's some level of anxiety, and all three of those things could be true, or maybe only one of them. So what is driving you to feel regret? You got to ask yourself these questions, or at least that's what I'm recommending. And when you explore these deeper, if they help you answer the question, why am I regretting the decision to get married? Then you're already on the way to achieving or to overcoming your regret as a whole. All right. Now, this is something you should either journal, if you are into journaling, writing down your ideas and thoughts. And, let me just pause for a second, because I've had many people comment to me saying, Chris, men don't write in diaries. One, you're completely wrong. Men do journal, right? I'm not saying that it's called a diary. That's what little girls do. I don't know. But men absolutely journal. If you go and study the most successful people in the world, they take an account for the things that they're doing and the things that they want to do. Journaling is that powerful. Now, am I saying that you need to journal every day? Absolutely not. Some people will probably tell you that, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to tell you, you should probably look into journaling if you think that that's for people who don't, I don't know, whatever your thoughts are on it, whatever your reservations are. Don't take my word for it. Go do some research. Go find out the success, like habits of successful people. I guarantee you're going to find on a majority of those lists, they're going to have some form of journaling. All right. Now, if for whatever reason you're not into journaling, maybe consider talking with someone. All right. The way that we as people work through our feelings, the things that we're going through, is we talk to people. Now, I get it. Sometimes for men, having deep conversations about our feelings, it is just uncomfortable. Makes us feel vulnerable in ways that we don't like. It just really doesn't sit well with us for the most part. But if you can get past that, there is so much healing and recovering in being able to discuss your feelings with someone. Now, the person that you should discuss your feelings with has to be someone that has your best interest in mind, not a person who's just going to side with you because they feel obligated to, or they don't have any real, they don't have any desire to see your marriage be successful, right? They're not interested in seeing you be successful. Now, that's a slippery slope because sometimes people see things that we don't see, right? They see the blind sides in our biases or biases, however you say that word. However, the people that you speak with or the person that you speak with should want to see you succeed in your marriage. So that way, as you're processing this regret issue, you have the ability to hear sound advice that's going to help you. All right. Now, with all that said, sometimes the regret you have isn't really the marriage itself, right? It could be something else, and you simplify it as it being the marriage. I alluded to this earlier, that maybe you are unsatisfied with work, so that causes you to perform less satisfactory in your marriage or at work. And then you come home and your wife is asking questions like, how was work? And you're like super frustrated, but you don't really want to tell her that you don't like work because you think that that's going to make her nag you or tell you, something else. And you don't really want to be encouraged. All kinds of stuff, right? Comes back to, all right, that's impacting my marriage. Now, that could have been a scenario that hits close to home. That could be a scenario like the one that I just gave. Could be a scenario that's completely far from the way that you see the world or the way that you think. The point here is, if it is something that's impacting you outside, you want to identify that because you got to deal with that separate. Now, we are a person that has multiple influences that are impacting the way that we do things, the way that we do business, the way that we see life. It impacts our worldview. It impacts our emotions. We are a whole person. We're not just one thing. We're not just a husband. We're not just an employee. We're not just an athlete. We're not just a father. We're not just a man. We're all of those things if those are things that you are, right? And it can go deeper. It can go further. We're not just a son. We're not just a brother. We're not just a cousin or an uncle, right? And I only named relationships to things, right? You could be a lefty or a righty, depending on how you write. Like, all of the things that make us who we are not always the thing. Like, you can't just compartmentalize it, right? That's the point that I'm getting at. But you do have to deal with certain things on their own. Like, my relationship with my mom and my dad should not impact my relationship with my wife. All right. I have a whole episode talking about that. Very important that we'll move on from that because I could go on and on about that. But dealing with regret, if I can just speak, dealing with regret can be tricky, but I do encourage you not to dismiss this feeling and just say, oh, I'll get over it. Like, no, if you're feeling regret, you need to figure out why you're feeling the regret, because if you just push it down the line, it's going to come back. Like, if you push stuff away, it's still there. You didn't deal with it. You just moved it away from you a little bit. But as that thing starts to develop some more steam, it's going to hit you harder the next time. So instead, you should really put that in your past, overcome it, defeat it, disable it, dismantle it, whatever you want to call it. You got to deal with it. All right. Don't just push it to the side. That's never good for anyone. So how do we do this? Well, one of the first steps, you got to remember why you said I do. Again, remember, I'm talking to newlyweds here. First 5 years of marriage. All right. If that's you, this episode is for you. First 5 years of marriage. Why did you say I do in the first place? Why did you say it? Now, here's some questions that you can ask yourself. What attracted me to my wife in the first place? What do you hope for in your marriage? What dreams do you share together with your wife? The answers to those questions are going to help you get closer to the reason you said I do. Because if you didn't answer those before you got married, well, now's a great time for you to pause and don't do anything else in this podcast. Sit down and figure out the answers to those questions. Now, there's more questions that you definitely need to answer, and we'll get to those probably in some other episodes. But these questions right here, time and time again, have proven to be the core to overcoming regret and doubt in marriage. All right. The question about what attracted you to your wife is really the question of the origins of your foundation. We all have an attraction to our wives. All right. Unless you are in some sort of contractual marriage where you just got married so you can get some form of a benefit. I mean, I guess in a way that is the attraction, right? I don't condone those types of marriages, or I don't agree with them, but that's your business, right? I'm talking to the people who had a relationship, they fell in love, and they proposed. What drove you to the point of proposal? That's the attraction. You got to get very, very clear on that. Very, very clear. Okay. Or what do you hope for in marriage? Because I said at the beginning of this episode, when you say I do, that's the beginning of a relationship. That's not like, that's the end of boyfriend, girlfriend, laying, or, whatever you want to call that. And now you have progressed your relationship into marriage, but that's not the finish line. If anything, that's the start line. It's the beginning of a chapter, and you're going to go through multiple chapters in your life as a married couple. And that's okay. That's actually great. That's what makes marriage so beautiful. But what is it that you hope for in marriage? And, I would urge you to go beyond the simple stuff like, I want to get a house, have kids, and grow old together. Okay, that's great. Like, I want you to have that if that's your ambitions. But what else do you hope for in marriage? What else do you hope for with your wife? And get as detailed with this as you possibly can, because this question is going to help you with relevancy. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then, of course, what dreams do you share together? So the first one is, what do you hope for in marriage? I just want to kind of differentiate these questions. The first one is, what do you hope for in marriage? The second one is, what do you share together that you and your wife both hope for? All right. What is that? What did you two agree on together? And maybe that does go back to, we want kids and a house, careers, working at the same company or owning our own business together, whatever it may be, right? Things that you and your wife have together. We want to travel the world and knock off different locations on a bucket list, whatever. That's important too, because that shows you the connection. It talks about the future. And when we can focus on the future, we start to move away from worrying about or we take some of the sting away from the regret, because it's like, well, I got married to do these things, or at least these are the things that I hope for. These are the things that we dreamed together to do. So that's the benefit of, asking those questions. So if you didn't already stop this podcast, then pause the podcast, write those questions down, or write down the answers to those questions, and then come back. But if you already know the answers to those questions, then we can definitely continue moving on as far as the why you said I do. All right. Now, the reason we need to answer those questions is, instead of putting energy into regretting your decision to get married, you can focus on achieving the dreams and ambitions of your marriage, which is also going to be a great return on your investment. And when I say a great return on your investment, what I'm really referring to is the energy that you're using. All right. Everything requires energy. That's just like the basics of life. Everything that we do, everything that does do anything requires some form of energy. That's like basic physics. Fun fact, I got an A in physics, and I always remind my wife of that. That's actually one of my joyful memories with my wife. And we'll talk about why that's important here in a little bit, but I wanted to kind of weave that in. But the point here is, everything requires energy. Anything that does anything requires some form of energy. If you are spending your energy on doubts and regret, you're not going to get a good return on investment for your relationship. But if you are spending your energy on things that are going to help, like positive memories that are going to help build your relationship, you're going to get a great return on that investment of the energy that you're using. All right. No matter what, you're going to have to use energy. You might as well use it for stuff that's going to help build your marriage. That's the point that I'm making here. Now, one of my favorite things to do is to recall memories of my wife before we got married, and even memories after we got married. Even more so the memories after we got married, because that reaffirms the relationship that we have together, that we are growing together, that we are building. And that's where the A in physics comes up. And, in short, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this story, but in short, my wife and I, we both got A's in physics. But there was a day when I was explaining something, and the way that I was proving my authority on this particular statement is, well, I got an A in physics in high school. And she replied with, so did I. And we just both kind of stared at each other. And clearly one of us were wrong in this situation, because the thing, I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I remember that it was funny because it was like, okay, well, what you're saying can't be right, and what I'm saying can't be right, because they're total opposites of each other. So one of us has to be right. Now, I don't remember which one of us was right, because it doesn't really matter so much. But the crux of that was, we laugh about it now because it became a memory for us that no matter what, we're always going to oppose one another. And we both may have the authority on a thing, but one of us may or may not be right. And so that's kind of our memory that we have together. So whenever something comes up, I always remind her, like, hey, I got an A in physics too. Hopefully that makes sense. It's fun for us. We laugh about it. And, when you can laugh with your wife, you're definitely going to get a positive return on investment. Again, laughing is a great source of energy use, or a great thing to use energy on. And if I can bring laughter to my wife, then I'm definitely going to get the return on investment for the relationship that we are building together. All right. Now, the power of recalling these memories is it re-glues you to make her more special. There's no one else, until I share this story with the audience, there's no one else that I've had this A in physics memory with. And again, this is a memory after we got married. So that's what makes it so much more enjoyable and exciting, because it's a reminder to me, it's an affirmation to the fact that my wife and I, we are growing together. And the power of using these memories is it re-glues you, and it at least helps reaffirm that my wife and I are growing in a relationship and we're moving forward. And this is why I'm saying it's more important for us to be able to recall memories after we got married, because that just shows that our relationship is growing. But the last thing that I'll say about memories is the goal is not to relive the past, all right? The past is exactly that. We need to look forward to the future. However, studying the past allows us to operate a little bit more effectively into the future. So when we have those memories where, again, we got to use energy, and when I use the energy to recall a positive memory, it's always going to be a benefit, as opposed to trying to recall or use energy to recall a doubt or use that towards doubt. That's the whole point here. Why did you say I do? Know that recall memories that are positive and are going to give you a good return on investment of the energy that you're already going to be using. Now, aside from recalling memories for the positivity of the return on investment, you also have small shifts that make big impacts. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. All right. Regret usually thrives on inaction. This is why we want to take action. This is why the whole crux of the podcast is to find ways to love your wife every single day. And because of that, you're becoming a better man in the process. And so you got to take action, right? Action is always better than preparation. Now, you should prepare a little bit before you take action, but you should always get to the point of taking action. And the action doesn't have to be massive. You just got to do it. All right. Now, the simple things could just be a genuine compliment, offering to do chores or things that your wife dislikes that maybe don't really bother you, but you can tolerate it. Or maybe they don't bother you at all. And, that's a win-win right there. You could also take her on a surprise date or a date night, whatever you can, make happen. Things that are going to help build your intimacy is ultimately what we're getting at here. All right. The more you focus on being present with your wife and you focus on her, the more you're going to be reminded of what attracted you to her. You're going to find new attractions to her. You're also going to develop a newly found appreciation for your relationship, because a marriage is way different than boyfriend and girlfriend. It just is. Even for people who were in a long committed relationship where, you were boyfriend and girlfriend for like 12 years. And then you're like, all right, let's get married. And now you're in year 1, year 2, year 3, whatever it may be. And that's very different than the 12 years that you were dating or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever label you put on that status of the relationship. Like, that matters because it does play a part and you have tons of memories built in there. However, when you get married, there's a different level of commitment because now you have entered into a covenant, and covenants have consequences. A relationship, no real consequences, but a covenant that is broken, a matrimony that is broken, has real consequences. All right. So taking action really does matter. And the more you do it, the more you're present, the more you're going to find ways of loving your wife and becoming a better man in the process. Again, I say this, there's a reason why it is the tagline of the show, and I say it every single episode. Now, one of the things that I find husbands struggle with in marriage is they don't have any emotional intimacy with their wife. So I'm going to try and help break down some ways that you can regain or gain the emotional intimacy with your wife, because ultimately lack of emotional intimacy does trigger, it's like the feeding grounds of regret. Because if you're not intimate with your wife, and I'm not talking sex, by the way, I'm purely talking relationship, the ability to understand one another, the ability to communicate regularly, the ability to have emotional quotient or emotional intelligence about your wife, right? Like if your wife says something, you hear her, even though she may be saying it a little bit differently. Like you're not hearing the words she's saying, you're hearing what the words mean when she says them. And yes, men, I'm still learning that. It's confusing in females' language. Like it's almost like, what's the little marker when you can write and then you put a UV light over it and invisible marker. Wow. Way to go, Chris. Anyway, they speak that way. Women can unpack that type of stuff. Whereas us men, we do not unpack that. And it is just like completely over our heads. All right. Here's the deal. What you can do to regain the emotional intimacy is you can ask these questions to your wife whenever you come home. All right. First one, what happened in your day that made you smile or laugh? And then ask for the details leading up to that moment. Now, the next questions, what happened in your day that made you angry? Give me the details leading up to that moment. And what happened in your day that made you sad? Give me details leading up to this moment. You can ask either of these questions. You can mix and match them. You could add in a different word for laugh, angry, or sad. Whatever you choose. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're present. You're asking questions where she can't just say yes or no. She has to actually open up. And you'll be able to gauge how well your wife trusts you when she answers these questions. The thing that made you laugh or smile or happy or excited or whatever, usually like we as people tend to want to share the good things that happen to us. Your wife may not feel comfortable enough to share the challenges or the struggles or the frustrations that she encountered throughout the day with you if she doesn't trust you. And that is a clear indicator that you don't have the emotional intimacy that you require to overcome the regret. So now you got to start dealing with that. And that's not bad, because that at least gives you the area that you can start working on. And I think that this is a place where many men struggle. I struggle at times in this area, but I also am aware of it. So I make conscious actions, right? I take action. I don't just observe the problem, admire it, and then never do anything about it. I do stuff about it. And then it forces my wife to make a decision. Am I going to come out of my shell, or am I going to stay inside of my shell? But one thing that I don't like to allow happen in my marriage, and again, I want to make sure that I make it clear. I'm no like perfect husband, right? I'm the perfect husband for my wife. That I can tell you. But I am not perfect by any means or any stretch of the imagination. So if there's anyone listening to this and you're like, Chris, you just got all the answers. I don't. I don't. Instead, I try things with my wife to see how I can improve our marriage, because I'm committed to building that. That's what I got. All right. And that's what the decision that I made 17 years ago. And even before then, but 17 years ago when we got married, I said, I do. And I commit to our relationship. So that's something that I want to make very clear. But getting back to this idea of rebuilding emotional intimacy, taking action on that is extremely important, because when you are focusing on building your relationship, you don't have time to focus on doubt or regret. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to get you to deal with, because every time, like, unfortunately, I don't think the doubt or the regret is going to go away forever. But the little voice that keeps telling you, like, did you make the right decision, or you could have gone over here with this person, or whatever, that I think that voice is going to be there. However, it's how you respond to that voice. And if you say, well, no, I have the love of my life, I'm building a wonderful relationship with my wife, and you just keep punching that particular thought of regret or self-doubt or whatever in the face, you're going to have less encounters with it, right? Because it's going to be defeated every single time. And that's why you got to go back and answer those questions of what attracted you to your wife, what is it that you hope for in your marriage, and what is it that you and your wife share together, all right? Those are the foundation to responding to that regret or that doubt. Then you build emotional intimacy. Either you build it for the first time, or you build it stronger. Either one is fine. You choose. It's up to you. But build it either way. All right. Now, I do have to give some disclaimers about the last two questions of angry or sad and leading up to the moment. It's possible that you caused your wife to be angry or sad in that day, and you're going to get an earful about that. Deal with it. Listen to her. Be present, because she's opening up to you. She's being vulnerable about the thing that's bothering her. Don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. Instead, hear what she's saying and then start working. And I'm not saying to instantly start working on a plan, because you got to be present, right? And validate the way that she's feeling, even if you don't agree with it, right? You could be completely left field, like, I don't agree 100% at all with what you're saying. That's fine. Validate her feelings anyway, and then come back and start to rework whatever it is that you need to build the relationship. All right. If you try to devalidate her feelings, she's going to shut you out. She's going to retract to her shell. But the deal here is we all have past traumas. You married your wife. She may have some traumas, known or unknown. And those things are going to cause friction when you try to build this intimacy. That may even be the cause of your regret. Maybe you found out something about your wife that she didn't disclose to you before you got married, but the same thing holds true to you. The known and unknown things that make you who you are also the things that your wife said, I do too, known or unknown at the time. And that's why it's important that you make the commitment and that you stick with it. And as you discover things that are new, things that you didn't expect to discover, Then you start to work through those things. Then you start to build your marriage. Then you start to build your relationship. And that is what is going to bring you closer together. All right. I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. Like nowhere in this podcast is Chris saying this is an easy thing to overcome. No, it's not. It's hard. And for any wives that are listening and you're like, man, why is this so hard? It's not hard for me. Good for you. But the truth is overcoming doubt is always hard. And for husbands in marriage, overcoming the doubt of, did I marry the right woman? It's not like the most difficult thing that we'll ever deal with, but it is a true thing that men deal with. Now, not all men deal with this, by the way. I don't deal with it. I know that I have dealt with it in the past, but I don't deal with it anymore. I don't have that issue anymore, right? But if you had asked Chris as a newlywed, I absolutely would have said, I don't know, right? We just don't know. Now, that's just the reality of it. And I don't want to go any further down the rabbit trail with that. But let me go ahead and summarize everything because I went off on a few different avenues and I want to kind of re-glue the podcast here. So first key takeaway, understand the source of your regret. All right. You got to understand it. The second one, reconnect with positive memories. And the third one, take consistent action to build intimacy. That's the answer. Let me encourage you that joy can be found in your marriage, but are you willing to put in the work? You as the husband. And for the wives that listen to this podcast, you as the wife, are you willing to put in the work to build your joy in marriage? Are you willing to do the small, consistent actions? And because they're small, they may go unnoticed. That doesn't mean that you are not doing a good job. You can't run from the fact that you got to put in the work. That's ultimately what I'm getting at here. Now, something you can do right now, right? Because I try to give actionable steps as much as I possibly can, because I'm a huge proponent of saying take action as soon as you can take action. All right. 1, remind your wife of a time you both laughed, and live in that moment. All right. Like I said, I remind my wife often, or I won't say often, I don't want to oversell it. I remind my wife that I got an A in physics, and she reminds me she got one too. And that's just a fun memory for us. And we live in it in that moment. It's not a long lasting thing, but it's something that is special to the two of us. It has meaning to the two of us. Take her to a place you both enjoy going to. So maybe this is a place where you shared a memory together that you both enjoy. Go there. Maybe you both enjoy Starbucks, so you just want to go sit and have a Starbucks drink or whatever else they sell at Starbucks. Sorry, I don't know much about Starbucks. But you could also go and watch a comedy. All right. And if for whatever reason you're like, I can't really, we don't really like watching movies, that's fine. Watch one anyway. All right. And the reason why I'm saying it is if you both don't enjoy watching movies and then you do something that you don't enjoy together, you endure something together, and then that's going to help build your marriage. That's going to help build the intimacy. And if you watch a comedy, at least it's supposed to make you laugh. And when you laugh, that is like an instant way of remembering a positive memory. Like laughing is always positive. Even if you're laughing at a bad situation, you'll still remember it because laughter is always received as positive. All right. And that's what you want to do with your wife. You want to laugh with her so you can grow. All right. Small acts of love. I promise you, they go a long way. They go a really, really long way. Like I said, you can catch me in the description box or the show notes, whatever the platform is that you're listening to this podcast on, and you can get in contact with me. I will help out as best as I can, and just be patient with me because I do have a lot of stuff on my plate. I don't always get right back to the people that reach out to me. So with that, I want you guys to find a way to love your wife every day. Peace.